All right, here's one I've been working on a little bit for you, and this is called actually, it depends on where you read it, but either a foam split back emerger or a split back foam emerger, some combination of those words. And the unique thing about this fly, really, it's a pretty simple tie, but it's got this little peaking bit of foam that sticks out in the wing case here, and it's pretty creatively made. There's a few little tricks to it. It's not as intuitive and easy as might first appear, and I played with it a little bit, and I think I got it down now. So I'm going to show you how to go about this. Now, this one I have tied with the this is actually squirrel hair dubbing. I was going to say this was hare's mask, but this is Hareline squirrel hair dubbing in brown olive. And it's a pretty shaggy little mix, but it's about the right color. This is a pale morning dun nymph, a PMD nymph in this case, so that kind of olive brown color, that's a good nymph color all around, honestly. But the original ones, the ones we've got in the bins at the shop, seem to me, I don't have official word on this, but it seem to me have mahogany brown superfine dubbing is what they're made out of. So, like all flies, you can sort of mix and match and use the material or the color that you like. So because I have this one already tied for you, and it is tied out of that squirrel hair dubbing, we'll keep going with that. So this is tied on a standard 3761, which is a 1x long nymph hook, Tiemco 3761. But you can tie this on a variety of different hooks. Here I've got one, I can get it lodged up in my finger here, tied on a 2487. Exact same pattern, just on a 2487, so a little bit more curve to it if you want to mix it up a little bit. And of course, there's the bead head option, and I've got a 3/32 tungsten bead on there. That's a brown one. If I can hold that darn thing still enough, there you go. So you can add a bead to it as well if you like. Do whatever you want, man. So I'm going to pull this one out, and then I'm going to discover that I have not opened this new package of hooks yet. So I'm going to open it up and pull out. This is a size 16 that I'm going to tie, which is fairly appropriate. 16-18 is typically what I would say to tie these in. This 3761 does go down to a 20. For a PMD nymph anyway, 16-18. You can do this in a blue-winged olive version. There is a blue-winged olive version, and it is tied really exactly the same way, but rather than the yellow foam that we're going to use, you'd use a piece of olive. Now, what I've been using on this, just because I like to keep the thread head neat, is 30 Denier Nanosilk, and this is just plain brown. And I just kind of got this new tip, like when you go to start this thread, you can sometimes run into a few issues as far as starting your jam knot because it's so slick. And a friend of mine told me if you rub some wax on there, that it grabs a little better. And sure enough, it does. See how that just peeled right off though? You actually have to form a jam knot. There we go. So it does grab a little better. I'll trim that tag end out, and I'm going to bring the thread all the way back to the bend, and this is where we'll tie the tail in. So for the tail, what we want to use is a Mallard flank feather. And this is, I just dug through my bag, and this is a really nice one. You can see the tips of that are intact and pretty solid, nicely shaped. That's a really nice Mallard flank feather. This is Mallard flank dyed Woodduck gold, by the way. So it's not natural mallard, but it's dyed Woodduck gold. Of course, you can use real Woodduck if you've got it. It's hard to come by these days. And to be perfectly honest with you, real Woodduck is a fairly delicate feather. It's not very tough. Mallard is tougher. So I would actually point you at the mallard rather than real Woodduck. But you do you. If you got it, use it. Just for the record, to show you what most mallard flank feathers look like, if I hold this one up, you can see a lot of these tips are broken off. And they come in a big bag. You got a bunch of them, and you'll find a few perfect ones, but most of them are going to be kind of ratty like this. So I'm going to show you how you can use these, and I've done this before. And since I've got this beautiful feather here, I'm probably going to use it for the fly, but I do want to show you how to go about this. So for the tail, I'm going to peel off a clump that's about as wide as the gap of the hook, and I want to pull them out at a right angle so that they're tips become even. You can see this particular clump right here, if I hold it real still, has got some broken tips in it, which is not atypical at all. It's actually pretty standard. So when you go to make your tail out of it, you get kind of a weird ratty looking thing. But what I'm going to do is tear that off so I've got it separated from the clump. And then I'll come in here at the tip and kind of at the short. I don't want to get too far down into the thick part here, but right here at the tips, if I thumbnail that and just kind of pinch that off, you can see I can square that up a little bit more, and then I can bundle that up for our tail. And perfectly reasonable tail there. Now, just because I found this beautiful feather, I'm going to use it. If you've got good stuff, you should use it first. So I'm going to take this nice feather now, and I really don't need to tear the tips off this one because they're pretty much intact. But I'm going to take a little clump of these, and same deal, pull them out at a right angle so those tips become even. I'll bundle this up into a little bunch, and I'm going to tie it in for a tail right at the bend. It's about a half a shank long, right at the bend there. And then I'm going to come forward over that butt end, right back up to where I started my thread, which incidentally is about 75% point. Now the rib on this, if you look on the internet, there's a lot of different iterations of this fly, and they've got wire or tubing or any variety of materials for the rib. But the original, which comes from Solitude Fly Company, and I apologize, I don't know who invented this fly. I can't seem to figure that out. Doesn't seem to have a name attached to it, but I gotta believe somebody did it. It's not just a standard stock pattern unless it's from Ray Chang, which is entirely possible. Ray owns Solitude, and he's got some pretty crafty stuff too. So, but the rib on the real deal, after a lot of research, meaning I took one and cut it apart, is Tippet Material. And in the case of this size 16, I'm going to use 5X. So I'm going to take this piece of 5X Tippet material and I'm going to place it under the hook and catch it. Oh, I said under the hook. And I'm going to pull that down to length. And I'm going to wrap back over it. And I want to kind of keep it on the bottom of the hook. So you'll see I'll pull it down as I wrap back right up to the base of the tail. And I want to try to keep it on the bottom side. That'll just keep it from disrupting my tail when I start to wrap the rib. So once I've got that anchored in, I'm going to come in with a little bit of that swirl dubbing. And this has got some bigger guard hairs in it, but a lot of soft underfur also. I think you could really use a lot of different materials for the body of this fly. Really what you've got handy in the right color, you could probably make work. So I'm going to dub this down on my thread. And I want it down, a thin strand that's dubbed very tightly. And we'll have a few guard hairs that stick out here and there. We can kind of trim them off as appropriate if they're sticking out in the wrong place. Like so. So I've just got a thin strand of this olive brown squirrel hair dubbing. And I'm going to start this. Speaking of sticking out at the wrong place, you can see there's a little weirdness right there. We'll get rid of that. And I'm going to build an abdomen coming forward with a little bit of a taper. You can see I take a turn forward, a couple turns back, turn forward, a couple turns back, building that tapered abdomen. And there's some guard hairs sticking out, probably more than I really want right now, but I'm not going to worry about it yet. Because as I wrap my rib over that, it's going to tie some of those down. And the idea of those guard hairs, the thing I like about that is you've got some color variation. You can actually see really well on the camera. Those guard hairs are dark tipped and got a lot of variety in there. So a little color variation on your fly never hurts. So now I'm going to pick up my mono and I'm going to fairly tightly rib forward over the body. Right up through the abdomen, and then tie that off at the front with several tight turns, and then I can clip that stub end out and save it for the next one. Now, as I've been doing this actually makes a pretty cool rib. This is not something I've done much before, is using mono for a rib over dubbing, but that makes a pretty cool rib. Add some segmentation, not a lot of color, but does have a different effect. Kind of makes a little dark edge in there. You can see as I turn it, it's kind of shiny. I might use that in other places as well. Now I'm going to trim off some of those bigger guard hairs just to clean up my abdomen a bit. Got a big wad on your side. And I'm not really too terribly worried about anything sticking out. We've still got a lot of work to do on this fly, so a lot of that's going to get covered. So now I'm going to overlap my thread over the front edge of that abdomen. And I want to call this 60-40, even 50-50. I've been teaching a bunch of fly tying classes lately, and the 60-40 delineation seems to confuse people, and I think you just get it in your head that 60-40 is further forward than it is. And my answer to that would be, if your 60-40 point ends up with thoraxes that are far too short, you know, you might think that you want to go to 50-50, extend that out a little bit. And you can see that's probably closer to 50-50, let's say 55-45. Leave yourself enough room for the thorax. If you look at a real mayfly nymph, they are about 50-50, head and thorax to abdomen. So a pretty long front end on these bugs. Artificial fly proportions notwithstanding, the real bug is more like 50-50. So now we're going to get to the unique part on this, and the stacker pieces on the wing case are black Goose Biots. So I'm going to take 2 of these, and I'm going to set one down here while I talk. And I like to tie these in curve up, which is like so. I don't know that it really makes a huge difference, but that's the way I've been doing them. Now when I tie these in, what I want to do is not angle this so much across. When you see this fly, it seems as though you're going to tie that in at an angle. What I really want to do is tie this in by the tip end along the far side of the fly, kind of on the 3/4 top edge. To give you an idea there, that's actually a little bit closer to me than I want it. I'm going to back it up, let it roll just a bit more, like so. And you can see that biot is sitting out flat here on this far side. Then I'm going to take the other biot, and I just kind of match the length, just so that I have the same thickness. So I'll even the tips up, and I'll catch it kind of at the same angle on the near side. So you can see they're not spread flat like a Prince nymph. They're angled back on the sides. So I'm going to trim those tips short, and I'll wrap forward over those butt ends. And then I'm going to come in with a piece of razor foam. Now, razor foam is in the package, comes with 2 sheets of 0.5 millimeter and 2 sheets of 1 millimeter, and you want to use the 0.5, fairly thin foam here, like so. You can see that's a very thin sheet of foam, and I've cut this strip, in relation to the hook gap. It's actually just slightly narrower than the gap of the hook there, just slightly narrower, just maybe down to the point on the barb. And I'm going to back my thread up here and lay this flat on top, and I'm going to tie this in for a wing case. So think of sort of treating this like a turkey slip that you'd use maybe on a hare's ear. You're going to treat it the same way. It's just a little strip of foam, and I've tied it in on top, and I want to make sure it's centered. I want to make sure that my biots are lined up on it, and I see there that I want to go back just a touch more. Make sure there's no thread showing behind that tie down. So I'll fold that back. Now I'll come in with some more dubbing. This is the thorax, and most of our bulk is already built there. You can see from where we overlapped the abdomen and tied the biots and the foam in, we've got some bulk there already, so we don't need to build up a ton here. I'm going to put this on thin, and this is, again, teaching classes. I see what people are prone to do. Even on a slightly bigger fly like this, we live in Colorado, we tie a lot of small flies. So size 16 is kind of on the big side, and people tend to get in their head that it's a bigger fly, you use just a mountain of dubbing. You never use a mountain of dubbing, especially on a little trout fly. I want a nice thin, you can see in relation to that 30 Denier Nanosilk down here, that's 30 Denier, so very small thread. That strand of dubbing is not very thick. I want a nice thin strand of dubbing. And I'm going to start the thorax just behind the index point. So I want to leave about an eye length up here, so I've got room to tie in my legs and then tie everything off. So make sure you leave yourself enough room. You can see that space there, right here behind the eye, is clear. There's no thread in it, there's no dubbing in it, there's no tie down in it. That is something that'll go a long way toward making your flies cleaner if you leave that index point area. So you can see I dubbed from the front to the back, right up to the base of the wing case. Now I'm going to square that thorax off a bit, these last few turns of dubbing. And as I run out of dubbing, I'm going to come down in my index point. Got one little hair sticking out there. So just a nice little kind of oval-shaped thorax. So now we're going to pick up our mallard feather again. And I'm going to take another clump. If I can get a hold of it. Another nice little clump of these fibers. That's maybe about twice as big, 3/4, 1.5 times, 1.5 times to 2 times as big as what we used for the tail. You can see on the bottom of that stack there's a broken tip. He's actually short enough he's not going to influence us, but I would pull those out or thumbnail everything off so that they're square. But I'm going to pull those out at a right angle to the feather so that their tips become even. And I'll peel that off the feather. So I've got the clump like so, and then I just use my scissor tip to divide that clump in half. You can see I can kind of push that division back in my fingers and pinch it so that they hold separated. Grab it a little closer to the tips there, so I've got it in 2 clumps. And I'm going to take and push this back on either side, and you can kind of come up from the bottom, you can come from the top. I've got a guard here kind of blocking my way there, but like so. And I want to lay these in. I'm watching the monitor here. I see that you can't see what I'm doing because we've got this weird guard hair here. There we go. Get them down along the sides of the fly. Okay, and the tips are about back to between the hook point and the point on the barb. So fairly short legs there. I'm going to pinch these in place along the sides of the thorax. I'm going to come around with a soft turn. You can see that turn is almost totally slack. And I'll tighten that turn up and anchor those legs down with a few turns. Get a good look there, and you can see those legs are spread back on either side of the thorax. If they're not square, you can kind of take and tweak them. Mine are pretty square, so I'm not going to move them too much. But you can see how those legs are just sort of nicely spread back along the edges of the abdomen, or edges of the thorax. So then I'll trim the butt ends of the legs out. And I like to take a few more anchor wraps. This is one of the reasons I'm using the Nanosilk. It's not a strength thing right here, but it is a bulk thing, and this small thread works wonderfully where you've got a lot of thread work or tying off multiple materials right behind the hook eye. This small thread works just great for that. So I'm going to back my thread up here just right to the front edge of the thorax. I'm going to pull my foam over the top and give it a little stretch, just a little. Don't stretch it super tight. And I'm going to tie this down with a nice straight turn. And get a couple turns on there. Now, this is one of the liabilities of the Nanosilk, is if you pull real hard on that, you can actually slice right through that piece of foam. So those are medium tension wraps. And I've just pulled that over just like a wing case, nothing fancy there. Now I'm going to come in, and I'm going to take my Biot and kind of angle it. Let's get this so you can see it. Angle it across the wing case. Let me get it tied down here. Then you'll see what I'm doing. A couple turns. So I've angled that forward along the far side. That's actually my near side, your far side. You guys are on the other side of this fly. Now I'm going to turn this back toward me, and I'm going to grab the other one and do the same thing with it. Like so. So you can see that leaves our little yellow hot spot in the center, which is a pretty crafty way of doing this. There's nothing that's as bright as that yellow foam. I've tried a few different. I do actually have another version of this to kind of make a hot spot in a wing case, and maybe I'll show you that someday. But I'm still working on that. But that is how we make that little peekaboo spot. Now I'm going to get that anchored down tightly. Then I'm going to come in with the tips of my scissors and nick those 2 Biots out. Somebody asked me the other day about tearing them off, and sometimes tearing them off works. I'll be honest with you. Sometimes it works, but half the time, for me anyway, if I tear those Biots off, one of them will come out, and that sort of is true to form. As I've tied over the years, like a peacock quill, a peacock strand. If you try to break them off, sometimes they'll break off just fine, and a lot of times because of that flat quill, it just pops back under the thread and comes untied, and then you get to start over with a tiny little piece and try to get it tied down again. So I just trim them off. I like that little stub left. I've left room for my thread head. and you can see that's sort of cleared out behind the foam. So I've got a nice secure anchor there. Then I'll come in and trim the foam off. You can give the foam a little stretch. You can see you end up with almost no stub from that. Then I'm going to use my thread to just cover those butt ends. Just smooth everything off nice and neat. And I'll whip finish, just build a nice clean thread head. One trick on this Nanosilk thread, rather than coming in and snipping it with your scissors, just open your scissors a bit and push your scissors through the thread. That'll keep you from fraying it. You can see there on the camera, it's a tiny little fray. I actually can't see that with my eyeball, but I can see it on the camera. These damn cameras ruin everything. That'd have been perfect otherwise. So now I'm going to put a little shot of head cement on here. So I'm going to take a little gloss coat or flex cement, flex seal. This happens to be flex seal. It's what's sitting on my desk. And I just use the pin from the applicator to put a little drop on top and kind of work it all the way around. And what I'm doing here, let me show you this. So there's just a little drip hanging off the tube. You can see I can kind of pick some of that up. So I've just got a tiny little drop. And then I can use this and apply it around the head of the fly without getting it in the hook eye. And that just anchors everything down there as well. And that, my friends, is a foam split back emerger, split foam back emerger. Kind of a cool bug. That mono rib is neat. I like that. There's a big weird guard hair in there. See that? That thing looks giant on the camera. There, he's gone. Doesn't look at all now. But that's a nice little mayfly nymph, kind of a traditional mayfly nymph profile, but with that cool hot spot on top. Can't beat that. Kind of a fun little fly. I've tied a bunch of them, and they're going in my box. I'll fish these this year. I could definitely see this working. The idea being that the PMD nymphs, PMDs hatch underwater. They hatch into the adult bug underwater, so they start to kind of come out of the nymphohusk in the water column. So that little peak of the adult yellow bug coming out of the kind of brownish olive nymph is a pretty good representation. This is a hugely popular fly. We sell tons and tons of them in the shop. So I figured I ought to show you how to tie it. But there it is. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I did. That was a fun one. Thanks for watching. I'm Charlie Craven.